What makes a leader? What pulls us beyond what we thought was our best and into sustained greatness? Tune in right here with Ron Kitchens to learn how to challenge and change your best so that you can move forward into leading at your highest level.
Hey everyone, I'm Shannon Allen here on the Always Forward Leadership Podcast with Ron Kitchens. Ron, how are you today?
I am episode 293. Awesome.
That is awesome. We are on episode 293. We need to plan something great for episode 300 for sure.
Absolutely.
So, we're in November and we've got the holidays coming up. What are some of your favorite holiday traditions?
Oh, for me, that's an easy one because and I've told the story, written about it, featured it in my last book. It's a mandarin oranges. Mm-hmm. So it's this idea that, the Christmas food basket, given by people from a church we didn't attend, completely changed my life and perspective. And so, supporting organizations that do food baskets is something that's really important to Lynn and I, and we've got 8 or 10 now around the country that we support this time of year. We don't require them. We ask them to put in mandarin oranges, but it's one of those things that maybe is the single most meaningful thing that I do all year that gives me selfish great joy.
Yes. Our church, every year around Christmas time, we do something called One Big Christmas. And it was something that we started several years ago, actually, where we have parents who need help providing Christmas gifts for their kids. But instead of just saying, well, how do you have a girl age 10 and putting something together that we think that kid would want and handing it to them, we actually set up a toy store at our church. And so we taking donations and everything, and the parents are able to come with a voucher and shop for their kids.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and it's been really rewarding to watch. I don't think we understood the implications of it, but parents that come through and tell us how empowered they feel, being able to pick a toy off a shelf for their own kid instead of being handed a bag of toys, is pretty amazing. So, and I'm kind of the same way. It gives me that selfish, joy of just seeing that. For families. So
I think that's amazing. I think it reminds me of this thought that empowering the normal is so important for folks. There's a great church in north of Chicago called Willow Creek, and Willow Creek really invented the idea of the mega church. But one of the things they did is that, not dissimilar than lots of churches, had a food pantry. But they set up their food pantry as a grocery store. And it looks like a grocery store. It feels like a grocery store. It's stocked like a grocery store. And people come in and shop name brand products. They pick out, do you want 2 dozen eggs or a dozen eggs? But you have a voucher amount. So it teaches people how to shop with dollar values, not government subsidized chips, tokens, whatever you would call it. But it also gives them a normalized experience, and being in there and seeing that in real time, I kind of forgotten how powerful that is.
Right, it is the things that we take for granted that are normal, that aren't accessible to so many people. So I was at a conference earlier this year where a man who advocates for homeless people was talking about the statistics of how long most homeless people go without somebody making eye contact.
Yeah.
And I've not forgotten that. I just haven't forgotten that. And so, that normalization of somebody looking me in the eye is something, we look each other in the eye, at least 20 times a day probably. But yeah, bringing normalization to people who don't have access to those things is so important.
It is.
So today we're going to be talking about startup hacks. And so there has not been 2 weeks that have gone by since I started working with you, Ron, where I haven't learned about a business that you started at some point. It's like the gas station, the horse business, the wine business, and every couple weeks I just get this new surprise drop of a business that you were a part of. And so I'm like, who better than Ron Kitchens to talk to potential startup owners and current startup owners about some tips and things that you've learned over the years. So can you just tell us about some of the businesses that you've started and been part of?
Sure. So it should be clear that I'm not a flake. Well, maybe I am a flake, but
You're not a flake.
I have always liked business and wanted to know how it worked. I was more interested in a kid in understanding how the baseball ownership of a team worked than I was fascinated by the play on the field. But always, and probably why I do economic development, part of it is I'm fascinated how we can use the resources of a business that creates value, that creates profits, that creates outcomes, that we can then use those to create other outcomes and experiences. So I like business. Now, I got into business because I was poor, because I couldn't afford to go to college. And so I was able to acquire a gas station, convenience store, kind of, sort of, in those vernacular of those days. But I was able to then leverage multiple business opportunities and multiple locations from that. Not so much because I had a passion for convenience stores or had a passion for gasoline or oil or selling Snickers bars, but I had a passion for employing people. I had a passion for this idea that if I could just grow, I could get more people jobs. I could get, I remember, a friend of mine's dad was a bus driver for Greyhound, and they went on strike, and we're on extended strike, and he couldn't pay the rent. And I could give him a job, and he could pay his family's rent, take care of his family. And so those are the things that I love about business. Business enables me to change the world. Also enables me to learn about things in a way that matters. That's not a tourist, but an owner. And so, I've done everything from, import, export of rugby equipment, pre-internet. There was no way of, you could, go to Europe or go to, Australasia and pick up rugby equipment. But there just were, 2 vendors in the country, and you kind of got what you got. And so I was able to put together some relationships, and in import-export equipment, we were actually exporting American softball jackets, satin jackets embroidered to Europe. And then bringing in European rugby equipment. And it was fun, and we sold a lot of those things.
That's cool.
And then, the internet came along, disrupted it all, and now there's lots of access for everybody. So it's not really something very interesting.
Right.
I'm more interested in solving problems than I am the profit that comes with it, which probably makes me a crappy businessman. But I don't know. So, but we've done things like, Catalyst University, the Leadership Conference. But again, that was about seeing a problem and saying, what are the solutions that we have the ability to leverage to solve a problem, to change a community. And in that case, it was this idea that, and we're seeing it manifest itself, and I hate that I'm right, but what we projected was about this time, not knowing COVID was coming, but a decade ago or longer, said there's going to be a cliff, that baby boomers are going to leave the workforce in mass. And we got with some stock market folks, and they projected, here's what the market's going to do. And they projected, here's at the point the baby boomers will start jumping. COVID pushed that forward by about 18 months. But what we saw that was important was the next generation is smaller. And then the generation after that was the one that was going to be faced with the burden of replacing the baby boomers. And they were going to have to do so at a way where they weren't given the experience, the training, or the development that all preceding generations had gotten in their personal development. So we had to find a way to speed up that educational process, to burden people with knowledge about what it was going to take to learn, so that when they got there, they remembered, oh, Jess Ekstrom talked about that story, and now I know how to use that story and apply her work to my work to allow my organization to thrive. And so that's really where Catalyst University came from. Consultant Connect, and both of those, Catalyst University and Consultant Connect, continue on without me. They're thriving. Consultant Connect, came out of this idea that I saw economic developers being abused by these consulting groups, by printed media, by all kinds of people who were promising them success but weren't delivering anything that was going to enable that. And they were doing it with fear that if you don't do this, your board's going to think you're not competent and you're going to get fired. And then they would get them to place these big ads that never generate deals that could justify the expense. So they'd get them to go to the conferences in these luxury islands. Well, that's how people's career die, is doing that. And so I could not stand by and watch my peers, watch economic developers be abused by these unscrupulous people. And so we created Consultant Connect, because when we went to the site consultants around the country, they had the same exact issues of economic developers being treated like chattel or slot machines by some of their peers, a lot of their peers, by these publications. And so what we did was create a marketplace where, in our model, everybody's sitting on the same side of the table. There is no two sides of the table. We all thrive together. We all succeed together. We hold each other with the highest values. And first and foremost, we respect each other for the really hard, amazing work we're all trying to do together.
I really love that concept of starting businesses to solve problems. So many people start a business because they don't want to work for anybody else anymore.
Or can't. Nobody will tolerate their
BS.
BS.
Right. Or, I just want a side hustle. I just want a little bit of extra money. I just want, but I think solving a business or starting a business that solves a problem is what will help make your business successful. Because if your business isn't solving problems, you're not relevant.
That's right.
So that's really important. So tell us about your most successful and your least successful ventures and what you learned from those, or what you attribute that to.
Oh, I think the most successful is Consultant Connect, and Carla and Faye and Nick are just doing an incredible job running that. I am such a huge fan of theirs, and I'm grateful they don't need me to be involved there because of how amazing they are. And they're changing people's lives every day, and it allows me to go work on other things. I think the thing that I was probably least successful at is we launched a magazine a few years ago around this idea that there was no media telling the stories that we needed to have told. And it wasn't that we were trying to manipulate it. It's just they weren't interested in telling stories that weren't negative or ugly or man bites dog. And we needed stories that lifted up people, that burdened people with knowledge that they needed every day to thrive. And we did it in a magazine format, and it did okay, but the cost and the slowness of it didn't match the needs of society. Nobody's interested in reading. Nobody wants to eat 3-day-old bread or read a 3-day-old story.
Right.
And so we pivoted and went to a digital version. And Heather Smith Baker, who led that business, is incredible and made it so relevant and so dynamic and amazing that we took something that that was just wasn't quite on life support, but it certainly was not as healthy as it should be. Wasn't going to run the 4-minute mile, and pivoted it to a strategy that is incredible and dynamic and serves everyone so well.
Absolutely. And pivoting a business that's not performing the way you want it to, rather than just giving up on it or shutting it down, the way you're pivoting that I think is a great lesson for leaders and startup owners to learn, that just because your idea doesn't work the way you started it doesn't mean it's a bad idea overall,
That's right. Or there's not value there that can be discerned and translated and create an even higher set of values.
Absolutely. So the business plan. Everyone says that, the business plan is important, and of course it is. But I've met startup owners who don't know what that is, don't know where to start. So where do you start with developing a business plan?
So, one of the businesses that I was very active in, Life Science Venture Fund, where I served as the general partner, so the head of the fund, we would get business plans that would be 400 or 500 pages. And I can tell you, we never read them.
Right.
Not interested. Give me a 6-page business plan. What's the old saying? Maybe it's not Shakespeare, but I'll claim it's Shakespeare because it's probably going to be on the internet and, to be true. But, I wrote you a long letter because I didn't have time to write you a short one. And so if you can't say it in a way that you and I can have a very quick 15-minute conversation on, you don't get what you're doing.
Right.
I don't need your projections of 90 years worth of financials, because one of those numbers, the numerator or the denominator being off on page 1 makes the whole thing of no value. So a business plan is what problem are we solving? What resources, time, talent, treasure do we need to solve that in? Why should we be the ones solving it versus somewhere else? Who's trying to solve it besides us? And what's the return on investment for solving that problem? And in today's world, I think the return on investment isn't just the financial bottom line.
Right.
It's what's the impact on society and culture? What's the financial impact? What's the impact on environment? And depending on where you are, I have several friends who are in the social entrepreneurial phase, and one of them is focusing on pulling plastics out of the ocean and finding products that they can use those plastics to do.
Wow.
He's really focused right now on bags, canvas bags, redoing the plastic into a form of canvas, making these cool canvas beach bags.
Wow.
And so from me, you go, okay, is his business bags or is his business clean ocean?
Right.
And so it's okay that his outcomes are both, because that's what makes it interesting. If he was just doing bags out of recycled plastic, I go, what are you talking about? I can buy those off Alibaba, at pennies a piece and have, it's assuming I can ever get them delivered from China.
Right, they'll be here in 6 months.
But I can buy them there. So it has to be bigger than that. So, a business plan is about the soul of the opportunity, not about the financial demographics.
Right. It sounds like it's not just about finding your why, but having a why that matters to other people too.
Particularly if you're asking other people for their money.
Right.
In the typical, successful business, pre-COVID need about $25,000 of outside money. That was whether it's friends, families, and fools, or a loan from your bank or your credit card or whatever it is. You're going to need about $25,000 that you don't have in your checking account. And so a lot of times the business plan is critical to that.
Right. Absolutely. So how do you keep a good pulse on your business to make sure that you're following that plan?
Get an outside advisor to help you figure out what the numbers are that matter.
Okay.
Because too many times we can all fool ourselves into measuring things that don't matter. But there's certain numbers that matter at different times. Cash flow matters. Doesn't matter how well you're doing. If you can't pay the light bill,
right?
If you can't pay for the sewing machine, you can't sew the bag to sell it to go out the door. So cash flow is critical. But also, if you're my friend pulling plastics out of the ocean, how many pounds of plastics you pull out is critically important, because that's your raw material to create the cloth that's going to create the bag. But There are other things that just because you can measure them don't mean they matter. So you've got to have somebody who's a third party to help you figure that out and help you then figure out how you easily track that and where your green lines, yellow lines, and red lines are. Where I'm getting close to this. I better make sure my collections are coming in, or I better find out why we're not getting more, this or that done. But you got to know what you can measure, what matters, and then what the critical inflection points are.
Wow. Okay. So how do you know when it's time to make major adjustments to, so let's say you're following your business plan, but it's just not working? How do you know when it's time to make those adjustments or go back to the drawing board even?
So I'm a big believer on a board of directors. So, and I don't necessarily mean, corporate titan board of directors. It could be as simple as, a personal board of directors, but a group of men and women who are regularly hearing your story, who can then challenge you that that you may need to look at things different. So another friend and another bag story. So my friend Jeff Schinnebarger, who runs Plywood People in Atlanta, when Jeff first began, one of the ways Jeff was funding the not-for-profit and meeting his social responsibility is he bought had donated some commercial sewing machines, and sign companies were donating the canvases off of signs. Jeff had come out of the event conference business, so he went to a lot of us that were in the conference world and said, "You're buying bags to put swag for the conference in.
Right.
I've got a group of immigrant women who need work experience.
Wow.
They've got to make a living here. I'm going to combine all this together, and then you're going to buy bags for me at 3 times what they would cost you normally. But you're keeping these signs out of the landfill.
Right.
You're creating jobs for immigrant women, most of which did not speak English as their first language, had just arrived, and were from some of the worst places economically in the world. And Jeff killed it. It was an incredible thing. The bags had the Plywood People brand on them, so it built his brand identity out. But a few years into it, as they grew the impact they were having, as they grew their programming, Jeff's board had to go to him and say, "This doesn't work anymore. There's other ways we can employ those women. There are other things that we can do, but with the resources we're using, we can get a higher return on investment for our social service outcomes than what we're doing now." And I know from my conversations with Jeff, it was one of the hardest things he ever had to do was shut down that piece of business. But his business has thrived and exploded. And I say business, not for profit, serving some of the poor, most vulnerable in the city of Atlanta and building up hundreds of entrepreneurs. And so it's been incredible to watch him. But it was one of those great pivots that I learned from. And I think a lot of people probably learned from.
Right. And from what you're saying, it really seems important not to use being a business owner as an escape from accountability.
That's right.
You still need to make sure you have people that you're accountable to be successful, I don't
know anybody who's successful that doesn't have accountability partners.
Right. Absolutely. So, culture. I've read a lot of success stories about companies that have great cultures. We just finished reading a great book by Reed Hastings.
Rules.
Right, about the culture at Netflix. And a lot of them talk about, when I was a startup, I wasn't doing this, and that. And once I got larger, then I realized how important it was to establish culture. And it just has made me think, it seems like it would be pretty important as a startup from the very beginning to start trying to establish the culture that you ultimately want. And so what are some steps that a business owner can take from the beginning to start kind of putting some cultural things in place?
Fire your brother-in-law, who you took because he would work for free or you felt guilty or needed a job. And, I said I've hired people because I wanted to help them, and I do, and I get that. But if we're talking about culture, then talent density is the most critical component. You've got to make sure you have people who are aligned with their needs, wants, and desires. You've got to make sure they're aligned with their commitment to serve without being managed. Because on a startup, you simply don't have enough time or capacity to deal with fools. And so you got to get those people out the door. Don't let them in the door, and make sure that you're focused on that. You've also got to pick inflection points. So there's been a bunch of articles written that there's this kind of valley of death for businesses. I found that it hits about 12 employees.
Okay.
So if you're a startup, you get about 12 employees. The systems you had to manage the operation at 12 employees don't work for 20. So you have to reinvent yourself. So for me, I tell people to plan and build a culture and systems that are double where they think they're going to be in the first 2 years, or where they even think they want to go. So instead of building a system that dips at 12, build a system that's for 25 people. And then when you start getting to 25, pivot and go to a system that'll do 100 people. Because that's the way you can have continuous growth. And you don't feel like you're stuck in this cul-de-sac of operations where you have lots of motion, but you're just not going anywhere.
Right.
And so it really is critical to understand who you want to be, who you want to go there with, and then what you're willing to do to get there.
Right. And talking about who you want to go there with, I mean, I personally have known many people who, had a dream to start a business, had a great business plan, and the person they chose to partner with, it never got out the gate, and so
fire your brother-in-law.
Yeah, fire your brother-in-law. So, and how do you know that you're working with the right person to be a partner to you?
Great example. So last week I went and looked at a company that Lynn and I were considering buying, a small consulting firm. We could relocate it to us. I could add some value to it. Didn't compete with anything that we do, but I found it really interesting. And so I had a meeting with the person, going to meet with them at 9 o'clock the next morning. I show up at their place at 5:30 the night before, and everybody was gone.
Wow.
I canceled the meeting because they were telling me about how hard they're working, about how dynamic, how committed everybody was, this great environment. But I got there, and literally every car was gone from the parking lot. The place was locked up tight. I had called. They had been there at 4:30. But these are people that are not fully committed. They just had jobs.
Right.
And that's, you've got the wrong. His problem is culture, not needing my expertise.
Right.
So I can't fix that culture if I'm buying the company to provide the expertise.
I mean, definitely finding people who are as committed, at least, if not more, to that dream as you are.
Yep.
So absolutely. So looking back, I'm going to ask you a question, then I'm going to ask you the reverse of it.
All right.
So what are some things now when you look back that you did that you say, I wish I'd done that differently?
I think I would be honest about the point. I love strategy. I love starting things. I like getting them running really well. The thing I least like is operating. And it just doesn't give me great joy. And so I would have a defined plan that says, here's my measure that matters. When we get here, this is where I have to hire somebody to operate it, or create a new partner. And where my partner now is running it, that's one of the great things about, Consultant Connect, because I had, Carla Sones, who was my co-founder. She is an incredible operator, as well as a visionary. She's one of the most incredible leaders and women I've ever been around. She could run those things where I could stay in visionary mode, relationship mode, strategy mode. So knowing what those lines are, Patrick Lencioni, has a new survey instrument out that helps people see of 6 areas where they're great at. And with this idea that you stay in your 2 top areas, you don't mess around with the other 4.
Oh, wow.
And I would have those rules and those boundaries put in place, because I'll get bored and break things just so I can fix them.
Right.
And sometimes that's good. Challenge and change your best every day. But sometimes I'm just breaking things so I can fix them.
Yeah. So the reverse of that question, when you look back, what are some things that you did that you say, if I was starting that business again, I would do that again, or I would apply that again today?
One of the things when I'm starting something new is I create a profile of the person I'm doing it for.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I remind myself that, because it's going to get hard. There are going to be lousy days. You're going to want to quit. But in my mind, I can't quit because, and I name the person. I know where he or she shops.
Mm-hmm.
I know, how many kids they have and what their dreams are about life. It's an entire profile,
Wow.
which is a tool that I learned in a writing class that I took in trying to be a better writer, is know who you're writing to.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm working on a new business or I'm working on delivering, I create this. Truth is, I usually have a picture.
Mm-hmm.
I have a whole profile. It probably
Wow.
looks more like a dating profile than anything. But I know who that is, because then I can't quit them.
Yeah.
I can't disappoint that person.
Wow.
And when I'm trying to make a decision, I think, well, what does Sally or Dan? What do they want?
Mm-hmm.
What do they want me to do here? And so it isn't about what's the most profitable to my ego, to my wallet, to my fame or whatever else. It's about, what does the customer need? How do we discern what that need is? And then how do we create a system where we don't disappoint them in behaviors that are unintentional but ill-informed?
Right. Wow, I've never heard that before.
I don't think I ever told that story before.
Yeah, no, that's incredible. So I think that is a really awesome point for us to wrap up on. Do you have any other thoughts that you want to share?
No, I think next episode is 294. We got to figure out something big for 300. So if people have ideas what we should do, talk about.
Absolutely.
I mean, 300 podcast episodes that's pretty cool.
It is very cool.
Yeah.
I think I've been with you since 276 or 278 or something like that.
So maybe we should get all of my previous co-hosts. We had
Yes.
cool people who've joined us and incredible guests. We got a bunch of great guests coming up. So if you all know somebody you'd like to hear us talk to, we got great feedback from, 4 episodes ago or so. Stephanie Stuckey was with us, and Stephanie had shared with us some of the struggles she was having trying to get the company restarted. And if you don't follow Stephanie, she's a great follow on LinkedIn, which is not normally where I get, great follows from. But Stephanie's a great follow on business. She just had this huge setback on the candy business. And so go follow her. Find people that inspire you, and let us know who are the people that inspire you that aren't Kardashians or famous. Who are the people just doing awesome kick butt things, and share them with us, and we'll share it with the world.
Yes.
So we love you for listening. Thanks, and we'll see you next week.
Have a great week.
Thanks for joining us. If today's conversation has ignited greatness in you, take your next step and visit ronkitchens.com to gain more inspiration and to connect with Ron. You can also tweet Ron at Ron Kitchens. Until next time, keep moving, always forward.